What is your tidings?
The king comes here tonight.
Thou art mad to say it.
'Tis true, our Thane is coming.
Give him tending, he brings great news.
Yes.
The raven himself is hoarse that croaks the fatal entrance of Duncan under my battlements. Come, you spirits that tend on mortal thoughts, unsex me here and fill me from the crown to the...
Sorry, ma'am, I'm sure I heard some voices coming from this room. Is everything okay?
Everything is fine, thank you.
You did not send for me?
I did not send for you.
Right, okay, my mistake, okay. Bye.
Unsex me here and fill me from the crown to the toe...
I'm sorry, ma'am, I'm sure I heard some voices coming from this room.
No.
No, nothing about sex or something? I'm sure I heard something.
Why is it everyone becomes obsessed with this? I said unsex me here.
Right, what does that mean, ma'am?
That means I hate my femininity.
Okay, but do you usually speak to yourself and ask...
Yes, it is... Yes, I do.
Sorry, I am new here. I'm just trying to get used to things. I won't bother you again, ma'am. I'm very, very sorry.
Thank you. Come to my woman's breasts and take my milk for...
But I'm sure I heard something about...
cracking conversation, analytical interpretation, and igniting imagination with the Lit and Lang Gang.
Hello everybody, welcome back to the Lit and Lang Gang, where this week we will be talking about gender.
I am the man, I will chair this meeting. I've forgotten. Actually, I need to help you there. I'm like Macbeth with bringing the daggers back. I really don't know. I'm going to have anything to say. I don't know what I'm doing.
That's Mr. Grimmett, if you hadn't worked out, acting the man in our gender podcast. So you've got myself today, Miss Graham.
You got myself, Miss Battiste.
And me, man.
Totally domineered by the women in the room.
Yeah. And we're going to talk you through gender today. And because you don't have anything to annotate while we go through this podcast, what we thought would be a good idea is for you to maybe pause the podcast now, go get yourself a sheet of paper and create a mind map while we do this, with gender in the middle. And then 4 sections coming off it, 1 for Macbeth, 1 for Lady Macbeth, 1 for Lady Macduff, and 1 for Macduff. Because we're going to go through them each in turn. And that way you've got a nice place where you can pop all your notes together. You can make a series of mind maps across all of the podcasts that we're doing on Macbeth and later texts, hopefully that will enforce your revision when you get there. Okay. So we're going to start with Macbeth as a character and his gender. Would anyone like to kick us off?
We're mostly just going to have to start with the man. I mean, the play is called Macbeth. He is the man. He is the title character. And he's the character that's most talked about because he's a man. So even before we meet him, those gender stereotypes of what it means to be a warrior in the 1000s is already almost precedes him. Mm-hmm. We know he's worthy. We know he's noble. When the captain speaks about him, the verbs that he uses and things like that, about how he and Banquo have carved their way through an army. I mean, we're not talking about what they look like. We're not talking about, what they do for a living. We're talking about the skills that they have that make them a warrior and a man.
It's physical, isn't it?
Can I throw something in here as well? He's fighting men, isn't he? He's fighting MacDonald, the traitor, and the ex-Thane of Cawdor, and he's beating them all. He's showing his physical strength, as you say. Also, he's fighting a woman in that battle, which I'm going to throw in here, because they talk about fortune, another word for luck, basically, and fate, being on the side of the rebels. And they refer to fortune as being a rebel's whore.
Yeah.
Now, whore generally is a female.
Yes.
Yes. How dare you?
Oops. Men also can be whores.
No,
Okay.
but I think you're 100% right there, and the fact that it's a negative, and we will be moving on when we talk about Lady Macbeth and Lady Macduff, that being feminine in this play is in a negative, and there's so much negativity that they take away from it at the end. And the fact that if Fortune's on their side, she's a whore, because she's not on their side.
That's right.
So there's like that double standard. If Lady Luck was on their side, it would be all fine and dandy.
That's right, because there's so many of them, it feels like luck is on their side, and then so the captain's referring to Fortune as a whore.
Yeah.
As the whore of MacDonald, which just feels very degrading.
Which means it might have been
the
on their
negative
side. And
connotations of that, like you say, deliberately making it female, deliberately picking an offensive term to describe.
Funny, though, that kind of fate or fortune wins out in the end over Macbeth, though, if we think about it. So maybe
Yeah, and if you even go even further and link fate and fortune to the supernatural and the witches, the women win out
Right.
in the end anyway. And Hecate.
Yes, of course, the weird sisters.
Yeah,
being
and Hecate being an internally female character, we see her a lot. Or when we see descriptions of her, or we see her on stage, it's usually a her. So
Absolutely. So it's almost like women win in the end, which
They
we just thought of.
kind of do.
Yeah, kind of, but kind of not as well, because
Malcolm
wins,
Macduff.
doesn't he, really?
yeah.
So he's very masculine in his physicality. He's masculine in his actions at the start of the play.
But it doesn't last for long, does it, Miss Graham?
No, because he's quite feminine or female in his interactions with his wife.
The man writes home to ask permission, if in almost a weird way, or even to let his wife know that he's bringing his friends round for dinner. Like, it's unheard of in that time period. I mean, Macbeth would be the lord of
The
his
expectation
castle.
that they turn up and just be like, I hope you've ordered a good dinner because they're here.
Yeah.
Whereas actually he's written home to almost give her the opportunity. Not that she could decline, but, you know.
My dearest partner of greatness.
Yeah, this is it. And the fact that he tells her what's going on as well with the weird sisters really...
And partner implies that he sees her as an equal, which is uncommon.
Especially in both of those time periods, it would be incredibly
And you compare the way he speaks to her later on. When he becomes more masculine, he'd be innocent of the knowledge, dearest Chuck. That's patronising.
Very much so.
But yeah, he's quite feminine in the conversation. You will probably be familiar with the fact he has less to say at the start of the play. Act 1, she has way more to say. We know that she takes his pentameter. We know that swaps as the play goes on as well. So by the time you're in Act 3, confidently,
she's losing it.
Yeah, she's losing it. He's gaining that power, but that can also be linked to gender, like because later in the play he takes on a more masculine role,
A negative masculine role.
and it's the negative aspects of it because each gender has their own negative attributes. But what he takes on are not so much the positive ones, but the negative ones. So he's very arrogant. He
Prideful.
is. Yeah, prideful. He is, as we know, he goes further into that physicality. Strong and brave is positive, but he goes into arrogance and complacency.
Well, and you could argue as well, he becomes less in touch with his emotions, less in touch with that feminine side, because he doesn't even get upset when she dies. He's upset in the beginning with the daggers, and he's completely wound up over that. But by the time he gets to the end of the play, those feminine attributes that he might have had, those small ones, where he's sharing his emotions, he's trying to sort this the whole killing Duncan thing out. He doesn't care.
I think by that point in Act 5, Scene 5, where he gives that speech, tomorrow,
Yeah.
I think he's depressed.
Absolutely.
I think he's actually got nothing left. He's totally drained, and losing Lady Macbeth I know he doesn't express it, but that's the last straw for him, and he gives up on there really being any meaning or any reason to
Which
be
is
alive.
quite interesting because you might argue that's quite a masculine way to deal with death.
To shut down.
To shut down, not to react as such, bottle it. By the way, I do want to highlight here that when we say things like it's a masculine way, it's a feminine way, we're talking about the stereotypical masculine feminine roles of Shakespeare's day.
Don't worry, guys. I was insulted as well. When
Toby, you used slander against us already by talking about the Lady of Fortune. So let's not talk about.
I'm merely using Shakespeare's words.
Yes, quite.
Which I guess brings us on to Lady Macbeth and her gender role in that relationship, because of course she is the masculine one
the
at
man.
the beginning. She has, again, more to say, takes the pentameter.
She unsexes at the start, doesn't she?
She does, but she calls on those spirits, and it's almost like I feel the spirits did respond.
Well, yeah, because when Macbeth then says we'll proceed no further in this business, she then is able to say quite kind of masculine and cold things in the fact that she would happily kind of
Bash their child's head in,
Absolutely.
then ruin the plan.
Absolutely.
I think there's a lot to say there.
She's able to. She is filled from the toes to the crown, full of direst cruelty now. Did the spirits kind of work? I don't know. I might try that out later.
When on Thursday, Mr. Grimmett is awful as a person.
If you hear me screaming, "Come, you spirits!" Unsex. Actually, no.
Maybe
That makes you
not.
feminine.
Maybe that would make you feminine.
I mean, we're feminine.
So you'd probably cry.
I'll probably just start crying straight away. Sorry. It's okay for men to cry as well.
It is.
I
We'll
want to
talk about
say.
that with Macduff, though. You are right. It's totally okay for men to
I
cry.
think there's a lot to unpick there, though, with what you've said and the idea of her being that femininity and losing that child or not having that child. I think that's a very important point in that femininity. Because there's this idea, there's gender roles, aren't they? That's what women would do. They would have the children, they would have the heir. And not having that, I think definitely there's no future for her as a woman.
Right, okay.
So she has to be a masculine character.
That helps us
because there's
understand
nothing
her,
left. So I think when she gets to that point where she's literally talking about bashing her child's head in, it's because there is going to be no child.
I think it could be perceived as well, like, because we know they have had a child. That child has clearly died, or children, or
pregnancies, whatever
it has been. They have had a baby because she says, I've given suck and know how tender it is to love the babe that milks me. So she has breastfed. But it's almost like I feel that when she would dash the brains out, is that not like some form of PTSD speaking? Like she's lost a baby and maybe it's her own feeling of loss as a mother that pushes her into this masculinity, pushes her towards this violence because she, like you were saying, she can't access that. She can't access that femininity. She doesn't have her child or future children. There's not going to be that for her. So what choice does she have but to become this violent masculine woman?
I think that's a really nice move by Shakespeare to include that line because about smashing the baby's head in, because it does.
It's lovely, yeah.
It tells. It's so nice. I often quote it on a weekend's morn. What I think it helps us understand Lady Macbeth and empathise slightly with her. But I think really it makes her character more realistic. You can have these conversations about her and understand why she might do something like that. As you say, in those day and age, it was to be a mother. That was the point. That was the point of, I suppose, of women, to give families men.
Well, and I think it allows us to tap into the feminine side of Macbeth as well, because when you lose a child, it affects both, and especially in that time where Macbeth had won an heir. So, like, losing that child and the fact that she says bash the brains in and it has such an effect on him, it's jabbing him in the femininity. It's what she does the whole rest of the play. Are you a man?
It's jabbing him in his milk of human kindness.
Yes.
He's the one with the milk now in this scenario, whereas women usually have the milk, don't they?
It is usually the women that would lactate, yeah. But it's
Not
also the way
being sexist there, am I?
No, you're not.
Fact.
That is biological fact.
Biological.
But it's also the way she just comes back to that idea so often, doesn't she? Like she mentions, take my milk for gall, pluck my nipple from its boneless gums, too full of the milk of human kindness. She comes back to that idea. It's playing on her mind, isn't it? It's in her subconscious.
She's a semantic field of
breastfeeding,
maternal love, like our loss,
but subverts it to use it in a quite a violent, degrading way.
Because she can't fit into that gender role for her anymore now.
I like that. I'm seeing it in a different way. Unsex me here. Somebody who just doesn't want to be a woman anymore.
Why have it when you can't do it? Like use
when
it.
she says take my milk for gall, why have breast milk? Why produce it when it's not doing anything?
And also, like, if you have a child that dies,
just a reminder of
if the child is born and it dies, the breast milk still keeps coming. It takes a long time to dry up.
That's a horrible reminder, isn't it?
And it's painful. It's incredibly painful.
It's physically painful. Not just emotionally.
Yeah.
And as it goes on, just like her husband, she goes heavily into the gender stereotype, but again picking up the negative attributes of it as well. So the I don't know. Insanity is not a feminine trait, but the restless nature of it.
What's the word that Freud uses for feminine who can't?
Hysteria.
Yeah, I mean, she uses that in the beginning when she pretends to faint. She uses that femininity to grab their attention.
Well, she plays on that feminine role at the beginning, doesn't she? She makes choices.
When they find Duncan's body, in some scenarios, in some productions, she pretends to faint. She does say,
"Oh, help me, hence ho."
Help me, hence ho, and then I think Banquo and
Macduff to the lady.
Both of them says, look to the lady, because she clearly can't look after herself and she needs help.
But then at the end of the play, she takes her life, which that's not a feminine thing, but it's this idea that she isn't strong enough to deal with.
It's a weird thing because women are the ones who make life. Men kind of help.
You do,
but
you help.
Women create help. I'll come on a little bit. They help. No.
So
women create life. It's kind of their role on planet Earth.
So
to take it away is kind of almost breaking some kind of natural law.
Do we then talk about this idea that maybe Lady Macbeth can't have that physical child, can't fit into that gender role, so she incubates the plan? She gives birth to the plan.
She gives birth to the plan.
She nurtures it.
She nurtures it. She doesn't
it.
give birth to it, I suppose, because the witches sort of give birth to it, but she nurtures
nurtures
the plan.
it.
So her new baby is the plan for him to become king, isn't it? Really?
Yeah,
Which is
really.
possibly why, when it has happened, she is somewhat removed. Her plan has
Come to fruition.
nurtured, come into
Right.
fruition. She's released
Grown
it,
up,
and
gone to
now
university.
She's turned to a teenager, become very
Obstinate.
difficult to be around.
But yeah, no, she does go into that full hysteria at the end of the play. We see her restless, anxious, and like you say, taking her own life, which
I think, yeah, as Miss Battiste just said, her absence, the fact that we don't see her, speaks a lot,
Volumes.
doesn't it?
and when she dies, it's the you hear the cry of stage, and he says, Macbeth says, "What is that?" And
Doesn't recognise
Satan
her own
says,
voice, isn't it?
"It is the cry of women," as though that is just a generic sound that we
You know,
make.
just, oh yes, the women in the next
Women
house
crying.
are crying again.
Those women are off again. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which brings us on to her foil, which is Lady Macduff.
What's a foil, miss?
It is an opposing character, a direct opposite. The example I always give, because I saw it up in Miss Cox's classroom, is in Beauty and the Beast. You have got the Beast, who is externally ugly, but internally quite beautiful in personality. And then you can compare that to Gaston, who is externally beautiful and internally
Especially
ugly.
in the live version. He's so.
Oh, he's beautiful in the live version. But there's your foil, the complete opposite. And she is, because she is everything that is feminine, isn't she?
I think she's what Lady Macbeth would be if her children have lived. So like she is the typical woman of the time. She has her children. There's suggestions that you have the son and the other kids, because Macbeth does say Macduff does say all of my babes, all of my pretty things like that. So there is a suggestion there's more of them.
Yes.
So she's done her duty. She's had her children. She's living in that gender role that would have been assigned to the woman of the time. But she's not living in that masculinity, so much so that she can't even control her husband.
She can't, not like Lady Macbeth does at the beginning of the play, when Lady Macbeth kind of starts the action. Lady Macduff, if she was as manipulative as Lady Macbeth, she could have
Malcolm
kept
wouldn't have
hold
come
of...
back, because Macduff would never have left Scotland.
No.
She didn't want him to go.
She didn't want him
So-
to go, but he still went.
Yeah.
So
No.
that masculinity, I mean, we will get to talk about Macduff in a second. He overrules her there. And she's annoyed.
Which
She's annoyed
would
with him.
be, I hate saying it though, as a feminist, but that would be expected. That
In
she
that
would
time
listen to
period.
her husband and he would have the rules. So,
So she's quite outspoken and strong. Does she not?
she is. She's fuming, isn't she, with
Oh
her
my God,
husband?
yeah.
I mean, she actually says to the son,
What are you
"Your
gonna
your noble father's dead. What will you do?" And that's, I find it quite confusing for the kids, because they're like, "Macduff's dead," and I'm like, no, she's basically saying he's as good as dead now. You need to step up and be the lord of the house. And the relationship between her and her son is lovely as well. Like
So
it's
loving.
It's loving and fond and affectionate. Everything that we really, there is a complete lack of that anywhere else in the play. The only time we will see genuine love and affection, other than for your king, which, let's face it, is removed even slightly.
Can I argue here possibly that Macduff's son is kind of perfect balance between masculine and feminine qualities, in the fact that he can kind of talk with his mum, be quite witty, but then actually when the murderers come, he stands up to them and fights them.
He does.
I think it's because his age. Because it's always more acceptable for small children to be
Of course.
less into those gender stereotypes. roles.
Yeah, I
For
know.
all
I just feel that
teenage
he's...
boys listening, this is a message to say, love your mothers.
They have done a lot to bring you here.
mothers or whoever you made it with,
Yep.
and I think like it does seem like I was always struck by his kind of intelligence, the little boy, and just his sensitivity, and intelligence, and his braveness. And I think it's interesting that Shakespeare has him killed. So kind of like
On
the perfect
stage.
mix on stage,
Which
in front of everyone. It's like I feel like it's the worst thing Macbeth has ever done.
Is killing
to
the children.
have that little kid killed.
Yeah.
That kind of perfect balance of both genders, this kind of ideal person who would grow up to be a decent human being.
Like his father.
Kind of, yeah, absolutely.
Well, and it's that
Even
drives
more
Lady
hope.
M over.
Even more.
The children in Macbeth actually, and young people, because I'm going to kind of include Malcolm under this umbrella,
Yeah, he's
but as Duncan's child, actually represent very hopeful futures. We've got Fleance, we've got the Macduff child who is unfortunately killed but would have represented a hopeful future, and Malcolm. So actually children of our key characters do represent hope, don't they?
That's right, Malcolm is kind of a kid. I don't know how old do you think he
I
would
think
be?
it's about 17.
Yeah, I think it's 17, 18. Like, he wouldn't be
Really?
very,
It's quite old.
yeah.
I feel like it would be...
No, I don't think, I think he's definitely over the age
It
of
depends
15.
on the casting. It doesn't say the stage.
So he's just done his GCSEs.
Yeah.
Starting on his A-levels.
No A-levels, going right into kingship. Oh boy.
But yeah, but the thing I love, to go back to Lady Macduff though, she is feminine, but she's strong. So we've talked about the fact that, okay, she can't stand up to her husband, but when is it the Thane of Ross arrives and
Ross
says,
arrives.
like, basically, murderers are on the way, get out. And she's like, no, I've got nothing to hide. I've done nothing wrong. I'll stay where I am. And actually, it's very feminine because what she's doing is standing in innocence, because that would be, perceived as quite a feminine thing to do. But stand she does, and remain she does. And I was telling my year 11s, I remember we did Macbeth when I was in primary school, and they took us to see a production of it. And I remember this scene vividly now, because at like 10 years old, I was sat in this audience, and I remember her running off stage, and the scream when she comes off stage, and it's horrifying. Like, you see the boy die, that's awful. You hear her die, and in some senses, imagining what happened is worse.
Well, yes, and also as well, again, there is that link, there is that hint that there's more of them.
Yeah, there's
So as a
babes,
mother,
babies.
yeah, as a mother,
Pretty chickens.
you know you're dying.
This is the oldest kid, because
Yeah.
this is the one that's going to follow Macduff, and he must only be like, what, 9, 10?
9, 10, yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, chickens, I don't know how many eggs are usually kind of hatched in.
3, usually. I think it's 2 or 3. Like,
Is
most 2 or 3.
So, yeah, in a nest, it does imply that there's quite a few, doesn't it? I don't know if you could talk about birds and chickens. There's a lot.
There's
a lot of
loads of
bird imagery.
bird metaphors in that section, leading up to the what you egg. He's unformed, he's unhatched, he's still incredibly young and innocent.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know about the bird metaphors. There's quite a lot, isn't there?
Yeah, but I don't know how that well they fit into gender.
I don't know if they do fit to gender, more about innocence and purity. Perhaps.
Macduff.
I love
man.
him. He's the man.
He is the man.
He is just like
He's the
Macbeth.
modern
He's
man.
the foil of Macbeth in many senses. Just like in a way, Banquo could be argued to be the foil. Macbeth's got a few foils, really, hasn't he? Yes. But in different ways. Whereas Macduff is masculine physically, just like him. He is also a warrior, a fighter.
Well, and he's also has that in touch with his femininity as well, just like Macbeth. Because when the king dies, he's visibly upset. He's visibly shaken. He cries. When his children and wife are killed, he is devastated.
So yeah, Malcolm says to him, like, you've got to fight
use this
Macbeth
as your
like a
whetstone.
man. But the quotation you like, Miss
but first, I
Brown,
must feel it as a man.
Yeah.
probably one of my favourite lines in the whole play.
Yeah. Where is it on the wall? No, but first I must also feel it as a man. It's just like this embodiment. I mean, I was thinking, what is Shakespeare saying here? He's so ahead of his time in so many senses that essentially what he's saying here is, something that even today's society, I mean, I think that would make a nice conclusion on gender. Today's society perhaps haven't even learnt the lesson that Shakespeare's trying to teach us here, that men, it's okay to feel and cry. That doesn't actually retract your masculinity at all. In fact, it makes you stronger.
And he wins.
And that he wins. He's the hero of battle. He is the Macbeth from Act 1, Scene 2.
When you think about it, and he says, I must feel it like a man. And if you go back and you look at Macbeth saying, the firstlings of my heart will be the firstlings of my hand, and how he's acting on emotion there. He's not feeling that emotion and then thinking about it. He's just literally acting upon it. And it's that masculine acting on it.
I think this is a really key point just to take away in life. I mean, it's mental health week last week, wasn't it? And as you say, Macbeth, after his second meeting with the witches, the first things of my heart should be the first things of my hand. I will do things straight away and not really take time to feel them. The problem is you get men who are not in touch with feelings, do not talk about how they feel about things, who do not cry, and as a result of that, they take their anger, their pent up anger, out on innocent people. And that is not a manly thing. It's not a brave thing to do.
No.
It's not a good thing to do at all. So feel it, cry about things, talk about stuff, because then you don't take anger out on people.
And also the way that, and that is exactly what Macduff is saying, I must feel it. He says that to the king, his king.
Yeah.
Malcolm. That's bold.
He stands up to him.
He stands up to him, and Malcolm, and he does take Malcolm's advice. He says, use this as your whetstone. Use this to basically sharpen your sword, go in there, use this as your motivation to fight. And he's like, yeah, I will. And he does do that, absolutely. Because when he speaks Macbeth, he is wordless. He's just like, my voice is in my sword. I have nothing to say to you anymore. But
I'd say that's the fault, actually, of Macduff, really. It's good that he's honest and that he... and everything, but I think, as his wife says, he does lack the natural touch a little bit. He's not perfect. He's flawed. All of the characters in the whole play, on some level, are flawed, which kind of makes them more realistic and more believable. It's probably why these plays like this actually survive.
Yeah.
If they're one-dimensional, they don't work as well.
Yeah.
But he lacks the ability, I think, a little bit to show his love, perhaps, to his family.
You're right. I don't think he shows his love to his family. But weirdly enough, I almost take that, my voice is in my sword. I always read that as, like, I cannot express to you. I almost feel it as that is incredibly, like, filled with emotion. Like, I can't express to you in words what you have done. I can only express it in violence, which is very masculine. But at the same time, deeply moving.
Yeah, because he's acknowledged the feelings to get there.
Yes,
do you know what I mean? Whereas Macbeth kind of just acts upon those feelings. He does all the action, which is a very masculine thing, but he's not thinking about the consequences, and is not the whole play about Macbeth trying to manage the consequences of his actions.
Yeah, exactly.
So, I mean, there's a lot to say about gender, and we are not the be-all and end-all on gender in Macbeth. I mean, I've studied it for a long time, and even at university level, these are still questions. These are still hypotheses.
I think it's that thing, isn't it? Like, I know students always look to us for the answer, and we can give you an answer. It's not the only answer. It's an interpretation. And, you know, we're not Shakespeare. Shakespeare's not around anymore. We can't ask him. But what we thought we'd leave you on is the thought of, well, what is the message about gender that Shakespeare's presenting here? What is the takeaway from the play? What do we learn? It's easier to answer that question when you put the word power in it. You know, what is the message about power? Ultimately, it's quite destructive. It's bad unless it's earned or deserved or in some way. Gender, it's harder.
Because it's harder to, I think it's harder to define.
It's harder to define. And also, like, this isn't Shakespeare, you know, presenting very stereotypical gender roles and, you know, almost rewarding that. Like, for example, Lady Macduff is a positive character in the play. She meets her gender role. Lady Macbeth, bad character. She doesn't. That's not like Shakespeare. He presents very outspoken women in his plays, and they are often rewarded. So we don't have an answer. It's for you to kind of question.
Yeah, you could be just talking about women in the time period. I've done a lot of research on women in Scotland in the 1000s, and it really sucked to be a woman in that particular time period, specifically religious-wise and things like that. And there's a lot surrounding childbirth in that as well. There's this whole idea that your job is to get pregnant, but from the moment you're pregnant, you're actually seen as unclean in the eyes of the church. You're not allowed to enter a church when you're in your confinement. When you have a child, if it's a boy, you can get blessed to go back into the church after 33 days. When it's a girl, it's after 66 days.
Because they are worse, yeah.
Because they're worse. So, you know.
I knew it.
Yeah. I know. But so there is a lot. Maybe he's read into the time. Who knows?
I think it's a difficult one. There's no
one answer.
It's up for debate, and that's kind of for you guys to decide. All I know, really, I think, is that...
As the man.
I am a man, and I will use my masculine power to end this podcast.
Is that why we're ending it? I'm sorry, the man has spoken, guys. Do your research. What is the message about gender? Can you have a look at why? You're always welcome to talk it out with us. If you can find us in the school, where we'll be happy to talk about this with you.
We will proceed no further in this business.
All right, thanks, Macbeth. Pipe down.
Sorry.
Thank you very much for listening, guys. We will pick up with you again next week. Bye.
Bye.